The cursor blinked, a single vertical line of accusation on a field of white. It had been blinking for 10 minutes. The client's logo, a mess of interlocking geometric shapes that looked like a shattered stained glass window, stared back at me from the screen. More dynamic, the feedback email had read. Make it pop. I had no idea what that meant. My mouse hand was starting to cramp. I pushed back from the desk, the cheap office chair groaning under my weight. The apartment was still new to me. A collection of cardboard boxes, taped shut and marked in black Sharpie, lined one wall like a miniature. Defeated skyline. Kitchen. Books. Crap. It was a step up from my last place, a fifth-floor walk-up with a radiator that hissed like a cornered snake. This building, the Alcott, was older, but solid. Brick and mortar, thick walls. Or so the rental agent had claimed. SSSSST. I froze. It was a small sound, a dry, scraping noise from the hallway, right at my door. I tilted my head, listening. Nothing. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sigh of traffic from the street 4 floors below. Probably just the building settling. Or the wind catching something in the corridor. These old places have their own language of groans and creaks. I'd learn it eventually. I turned back to the screen. The logo hadn't gotten any more dynamic. I scrubbed a hand over my face. The friction of stubble against my palm was a familiar comfort. Maybe I just needed a break. Some air. A change of scenery, even if it was just the dumpster alley behind the building. I scooped up the small plastic trash can from beside my desk, the few crumpled sketches in a styrofoam coffee cup rattling inside. "God-damn old buildings," I muttered, pulling the front door open. The hallway was empty. A long, dim corridor lit by weak, yellow-tinged sconces spaced too far apart. The carpet was a faded burgundy, worn down to the threads in the center. I took a step out, my door swinging shut behind me with a soft click. My gaze dropped to the floor. And there it was. On my welcome mat, a plain choir mat that still smelled of the plastic it came wrapped in, sat a small box. It was simple, made of brown cardboard, tied shut with a piece of plain white twine. A small, square piece of paper was tucked under the knot. I crouched down. The floorboards felt cool through the knees of my jeans. The handwriting on the note was precise. The letters full and rounded. "Welcome to the building! May... Apt 404. My apartment was 403. 404 would be my next-door neighbor. I hadn't met anyone yet. The whole move had been a blur of heaving boxes and signing papers. A small, unexpected warmth spread through my chest. In a city where you could live next to someone for years and never learn their name, a box of what I assumed were cookies felt like a small miracle. I picked it up. It was light. The faint, sweet smell of baked butter and cinnamon seeped through the cardboard. Huh! The sound came out of me, a small puff of air. Probably some sweet old lady. I tucked the box under my arm, carried the trash down the hall to the chute, and sent it tumbling into the building's guts. The sound of its descent was a distant, clattering echo. Back in my apartment, I placed the box on the low coffee table in the center of the living room. It looked out of place among the clutter of my own half-unpacked life. A neat, tidy island of welcome in a sea of transitional chaos. I shouldn't just accept it without saying thank you. That's not how people are supposed to work. Even people who work from home and actively avoid sunlight. I stared at the box for a moment, then at my front door. It was the decent thing to do. Go next door. Say thanks. Maybe meet the sweet old lady. A brief, hopefully not too awkward human interaction. And then back to the blinking cursor. I walked out into the hall again. My door, 403, had a fresh coat of off-white paint and a new, brushed nickel number plate. I turned to look at 404. The door was different. The paint was a darker, dirtier shade of beige, chipped around the edges and near the knob, revealing splintered, gray wood underneath. The brass 404 was tarnished, green creeping into the grooves of the numbers. A thick, undisturbed line of dust lay on top of the doorframe. In the upper corner, a spider had engineered a small, silken metropolis, its strands gray and heavy with grime. Taped to the center of the door was a piece of paper, its edges curled and its surface yellowed like an old tooth. I stepped closer to read the faded, laser-printed text. For rent. The Bradford Realty Group. A phone number was listed below it. My stomach did a slow, cold turn. This apartment wasn't occupied. It was for rent. It was empty. My hand went up before I could think about it. I knocked. 3 sharp raps. The sound was loud, absorbed by the wood and the silence on the other side. I waited. The only sound was my own breathing. I could see the dust motes dancing in the weak yellow light of the hallway sconce. I knocked again, harder this time. Nothing. A draft of air, colder than it should have been in the enclosed space, slid past my neck and down my back. It felt like an open window in winter. My skin prickled. This was wrong. This entire thing felt wrong. The clean box, the neat note, the smell of fresh cookies. Then, this. A derelict, vacant apartment. I stared at the doorknob. It was an old, round brass knob, the kind my grandmother used to have. Dull. Worn smooth from 1,000 hands that were no longer here. On a stupid impulse, driven by a logic I couldn't name, I reached out and gripped it. The metal was cold. Colder than the air. I turned it. There was a loud clack as the latch bolt retreated from the strike plate. It wasn't locked. My heart gave a hard thump against my ribs. An empty, for-rent apartment shouldn't be unlocked. I paused, my hand still on the knob. My mind screamed at me to let go, to walk back to my own door, lock it, and forget this ever happened. Forget the box. Forget May. But I didn't. I pushed. The door swung inward on a squealing hinge. The sound was like metal scraping on bone. A wave of air rolled out to meet me. It was not the air of an empty room. It was thick with the smell of decay. A damp, musty odor of wet plaster, of things left too long in the dark, of rot that had soaked deep into the floorboards. It was the complete opposite of the clean, sweet smell of the cookies. The apartment beyond the door was a pit of black. No light from a window, no ambient glow from the city. Just a solid wall of darkness. It felt like it was drinking the weak light from the hallway. I leaned forward, squinting, trying to make out a shape, any shape at all. A floor, a wall, a piece of furniture. There was nothing. That's when I heard it. It wasn't from inside the dark apartment. It was from right behind me. So close I felt the puff of air on the fine hairs of my neck. A voice. A woman's voice. It was soft, sweet, clear as a bell. Did you like the cookies? A sound tore from my throat. A choked, animal noise. I didn't turn around. I didn't look. My body reacted on its own. I threw my weight backward, slamming the heavy wooden door shut. The sound was a boom that echoed down the long corridor. My sneakers slipped on the worn carpet as I scrambled, turning and running the few feet back to my own apartment. My hand was shaking so badly I couldn't get the key into the lock on the first try. The metal screeched as I missed the keyhole. I took a breath, forced my fingers to steady and jammed it in. I twisted the key, threw the door open, stumbled inside, and slammed it shut behind me. My hand slapped against the wall, fumbling for the deadbolt. I found the small lever and threw it. The heavy thud of the bolt sliding into the frame was the most reassuring sound I had ever heard. I pressed my back against the door, my lungs burning, my heart a frantic drum against my sternum. I slid down the smooth wood until I was sitting on the floor. My breath came in ragged, painful gasps. I squeezed my eyes shut. The sweet voice still echoed in my ears. The feeling of that breath on my neck was still there, a phantom cold spot. A person. There was a person in the hallway, standing right behind me, a person who had come from a silent, dark, empty apartment. After a few minutes, my heart began to slow from a sprint to a terrified gallop. The panic started to recede, leaving a residue of cold dread. I opened my eyes. I needed to think. I needed to understand what had just happened. My gaze traveled slowly around my own living room, trying to reacquaint myself with my own space, my own reality. The tower of boxes. The television on the floor. The laptop on the desk, its screen still glowing. My eyes fell on the coffee table. The spot where I had placed the small brown box was bare. The box was gone. The twine was gone. The neatly written note was gone. There was no trace that it had ever been there at all. The table was just as I had left it this morning, covered in a thin layer of dust and a few coffee cup rings. I stared, my mind refusing to process the information. It was there. I held it. I smelled it. I put it right there. The unlocked door of 404. The whisper in the hall. The box. Vanished from a locked room. I was not alone in the building. and my front door wasn't nearly thick enough. My back was pressed hard against the door. The wood was solid, cool against my skin through the thin fabric of my t-shirt. I could feel the faint vibration of the deadbolt, a small, dense piece of metal that was the only thing separating me from the hallway. I stayed there, crouched on the floor, listening. My own breathing was loud in my ears, a ragged, wet sound. I counted the breaths, trying to force them into a slower rhythm. The frantic thumping in my chest began to subside, leaving a tremor in my hands. There was no sound from the other side, no footsteps walking away, no whisper, nothing. My mind raced, trying to build a cage of logic around what had happened. It was a prank. It had to be. Some building initiation for the new guy. A stupid, cruel joke. They had a key to 404. They put the box at my door, waited, whispered when I opened the other door, and then while I was fumbling with my own lock, someone else, a second person, slipped into my apartment and took the box from the table. It was elaborate. It was invasive. But it was possible. It was a series of human actions. It was better than the alternative. The alternative was that I was losing my mind. That the stress of the move, the freelance deadlines, the isolation, had finally cracked something. That, I had imagined. The box. Imagined the sweet smell of cinnamon. Imagined the note. I stood up, my knees cracking. My legs felt unsteady. I needed to ground myself. I walked into the kitchen, a small alcove off the main room. The bare countertops and the packed boxes were a mess, but it was my mess. I found the coffee maker, dug out the tin of grounds and a filter. The routine was automatic, a piece of muscle memory that felt comforting. Scoop, pour, flip the switch. The machine gurgled to life, a familiar, domestic sound. While it brewed, I went back to my desk. The client's logo was still there, mocking me. I stared at it. I had to work. If I could work, I was fine. If I could just focus on the task, on the lines and the colors, then the hallway, and the whisper, and the vanished box would shrink. They would become an anecdote, a weird story to tell someone someday. The coffee maker beeped. I went back to the kitchen, took my favorite mug from a half-unpacked box, a heavy ceramic thing, battleship gray, and filled it. The steam felt warm on my face. I carried it back to my desk. I set it down on the cork coaster to the right of my keyboard. I always put it on the right. My mouse hand was there. It was my system. I took a sip. The coffee was hot and bitter. It was real. I could feel the heat all the way down my throat. I looked at the coffee cup, solid and present on its coaster. Then I looked at the screen. I could do this. I was fine. An hour passed. The logo remained stubbornly undynamic. My bladder started to ache. I pushed my chair back and walked to the bathroom, leaving the living room door ajar. The bathroom was a small, windowless cube. I flipped the switch. The fan whirred on, another loud and mechanical noise that drowned out the quiet of the apartment. I relieved myself, washed my hands, and stared at my reflection in the cheap, builder-grade mirror. My eyes were bloodshot. There were dark circles underneath them. I looked tired. That was all. Just tired. I walked back out to the living room. My feet stopped on the worn floorboards just outside my desk area. I looked at the desk. My body went cold. It started in my stomach and spread outwards, a wave of ice water through my veins. The gray ceramic mug was sitting on the left side of the keyboard. It wasn't on the coaster. It was placed directly on the wooden surface of the desk. A dark, wet ring was already beginning to form beneath it. I stared at it, my brain refusing to connect the sight with any possible action I had taken. I didn't drink with my left hand. I never put the mug there. I hadn't touched it since my first sip. I took a slow step forward. I reached out a trembling hand and touched the ceramic. It was still warm. Not hot, but warm. Cack. The sound was sharp. From the front door. A small, precise noise. Like a piece of plastic hitting the wood. My head snapped toward the door. The deadbolt was still thrown. The chain was still on. I hadn't imagined that sound. It was real. It was right there. I thought about the whisper in the hall, about the cold air from the dark apartment. My legs didn't want to move. They felt heavy, rooted to the floor. But I had to know. I couldn't just stand here, staring at a misplaced coffee cup while someone was outside my door. I moved slowly, placing one foot in front of the other as if walking on a high wire. I didn't make a sound. When I reached the door, I leaned in, putting my eye to the peephole. The fisheye lens distorted the hallway into a curved, yellow-lit tunnel. It was empty. The burgundy carpet, the spaced-out sconces, the dirty door of 404. Nothing. No one. My gaze drifted down. There, on the floor, tucked right against the base of my door, was another gift. It was a small, wooden box, about the size of a brick. The wood was dark, the varnish old and crackled. It had a small, tarnished brass keyhole on the front. Tucked under it was a piece of paper, folded in half. The same paper. The same neat, rounded handwriting. To keep the quiet away. May. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a prank. A prankster hides. A prankster runs. They don't stay. They don't keep doing it. This was something else. This was a siege. A wave of anger, hot and sharp, cut through the fear. I wasn't going to be a mouse. I wasn't going to let them do this to me. I was going to have proof. This time, I would have proof. I unhooked the chain and slid the deadbolt back. The sound was loud in the still apartment. I pulled the door open just enough to snatch the box and the note from the floor, then slammed it shut again, throwing the bolt and hooking the chain immediately. I stood with my back to the door, holding the music box. It was heavy, solid, substantial. It felt ancient. I carried it over to the bookshelf against the far wall, a tall, cheap, particle board thing I'd assembled myself. I cleared a space on the middle shelf, next to a stack of paperbacks. I placed the music box there, then I took out my phone. My hands were shaking, but I managed to open the camera app. I switched it to video. I framed the shot carefully, making sure the music box was centered, clear, and well lit by the overhead light. I hit the red button. The timer on the screen started counting up, 0:01, 0:02, 0:03. I set the phone down, propping it up against the books so the lens was aimed directly at the box. Let's see you move now, you son of a bitch. Let's see you disappear from a locked room when you're on camera. The adrenaline started to fade, leaving a sour, metallic taste in my mouth. I felt grimy. I needed a shower. I needed to wash this whole day off me. I glanced at the phone, the screen showing the live recording. The music box sat motionless on the shelf. I went into the bathroom, closing the door behind me, but not all the way. I left it cracked open an inch, just enough to listen. I turned on the shower, the pipes groaning in protest. Hot water hissed from the shower head, and steam began to fill the small room. I stepped in. The heat was a shock, but a good one. It soaked into my muscles, easing the rigid tension in my shoulders and neck. I stood under the spray for a long time, my head bowed, letting the water run over me. The sound of the water filled my ears. It was a curtain of white noise. Safe. Then the water changed. It happened in an instant. There was no gradual cooling, no sputter of warning from the pipes. One moment, the water was hot enough to turn my skin pink. The next, it was a torrent of absolute, shocking cold. It felt like stepping into a frozen lake. A strangled gasp escaped my lungs. The cold was so intense it was painful, 1,000 tiny needles stabbing into my skin. I fumbled for the knob, twisting it frantically toward hot. Nothing happened. The water remained punishingly cold. And that's when I heard it. Through the roar of the icy water, another sound began. It was faint at first, then grew clearer. A delicate, tinkling melody. Each note was precise, crystalline. It was a music box. It was coming from the living room. My blood ran cold, a perfect match for the water sluicing over my body. It was playing. The box I had put on the shelf, the box my phone was recording, was playing its music. Shit. Shit. I shut off the water. The abrupt quiet was deafening, broken only by the sweet, methodical melody from the other room. I didn't even think. I shoved the shower curtain aside, water streaming from my body onto the bath mat. I grabbed the towel that was hanging on the back of the door, wrapping it hastily around my waist. My heart was a frantic drum. I threw the bathroom door open and ran into the living room, my bare feet slipping on the wood floor. Hey! The word tore from my throat, raw and useless. The moment I entered the room, the music stopped. It cut off mid-note, leaving a ringing in the air. The apartment was utterly still. I looked at the bookshelf. The space where I had put the music box was empty. My eyes darted around the room, frantic. There. It was on the floor. It was lying in the middle of the room, halfway between the bookshelf and the couch. The lid was open. It must have fallen. I rushed to my phone, which was still propped up against the books. The screen was black. I snatched it up. The recording had stopped. I stabbed at the screen with my wet thumb, trying to get to my gallery. I found the file. It was there. A video file, 2 minutes and 14 seconds long. I tapped it. A black screen appeared with a white error message. Cannot play video. The file is corrupted. I tapped it again. And again. Nothing. Just the same message. The proof. My evidence. It was gone. It was just a black, useless file on my phone. A cold sweat, different from the shower water, beaded on my forehead. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I stood there dripping water onto the floorboards, a towel clutched around my waist, staring at the useless phone in my hand. My gaze fell back to the music box on the floor. Its open lid looked like a waiting mouth. Defeated, I took a step toward it. I bent down, my hand reaching for the dark wood. My phone buzzed in my other hand. The vibration was so sudden, so violent in the quiet room, I nearly dropped it. I looked down at the screen. A new message had appeared over the corrupted video file, a notification from an unknown number. Just a few words, glowing white against the dark background. You dropped it. The text message glowed on the screen. You dropped it. The words were inert, a simple statement of fact, but they vibrated with a malice that went straight to my bones. I was still standing in a puddle of my own dripping water, the towel a useless knot at my waist. The cold from the floor was seeping into my feet. My phone felt heavy. A block of ice in my hand. I had to move. I had to do something other than stand here and wait for the next text, the next knock, the next impossible thing. My mind, a frantic animal in a cage, latched onto a single, desperate idea. Contact. I needed to hear a voice that wasn't a whisper in a hallway or a melody from a haunted box. My fingers, stiff and clumsy, swiped across the screen. I found my contacts. Mark. His name was a small beacon. I pressed it. The phone went to my ear, cold against my skin. 1 ring. The sound was thin and distant. 2 rings. Out in the living room, the music box lay on the floor, its dark wood a stain against the pale floorboards. Its lid was still open. Waiting. Hello? Mark's voice was a burst of static, a word chopped into pieces by bad reception. Mark! Mark, can you hear me? I whispered, my voice tight in my throat. I turned my back on the music box and walked toward the bathroom, needing to put a wall between me and it. Barely. The static crackled. Man, you sound... Where are you? In a tunnel? I'm at my new place. Listen, something's happening here, something really fucked up. I stepped into the bathroom, the tile cold under my bare feet. I avoided looking at the shower, at the memory of the icy water. What kind of fucked up? A word or two was lost in a hiss of electronic noise. I tried to explain. My words came out in a garbled rush. There's this neighbor, a box. It disappeared. Then another one. It played music. The phone. I felt insane just saying it. The story crumbled as it left my mouth, shedding all its terror and leaving only a pile of nonsense. Dude, slow down. I can't. Every other word. It's a box of what? It doesn't matter what's in it. It just appeared, Mark. At my locked door. Twice. I paced the small space. 3 steps one way, 3 steps back. I'm not crazy. I never said fucking signal. The line crackled violently. Just lock your door. Call the... The rest of the sentence was swallowed by a loud pop, and then a low hum. Call the who, Mark? Call who? I stared at the phone. My own reflection stared back from the dark screen. Tired, wet hair plastered to my forehead. Then I looked up, into the bathroom mirror above the sink. For 1/100th of a second, the world tilted. It wasn't just my reflection in the mirror. Behind my right shoulder, another figure stood. A woman. Her hair was dark, her face pale. She was wearing a simple dress, and she was smiling. It was a soft, patient smile. Her head was tilted, as if listening to my one-sided conversation with a kind of gentle amusement. A sound caught in my throat. I spun around, my back hitting the tiled wall of the shower. The bathroom was empty. The air was still. There was nothing but the scent of soap and damp towels. What the fuck was that? Mark's voice, suddenly clearer for a moment, buzzed from the phone. Sounded like you fell. She's in here, I breathed, my eyes darting into every corner. She was right behind me. Who was? Hello? Shit! The line went dead. The hum disappeared. Call failed. I lowered the phone, my hands shaking so badly the screen was a blur. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't real. It was stress. It was the isolation. It was a faulty wire in my brain. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was that a person was in my locked apartment with me. A person who could move without making a sound and stand inches away without me knowing. Proof. The word echoed the thought I'd had before. But now it was a demand. Not for the police. Not for Mark, but for me. I needed to nail down reality before it slipped away completely. I raised my phone again, my thumb finding the camera icon. I wasn't going to try video. The file had been corrupted, toyed with. But pictures were different, simpler. I could take 100 of them. 1,000. I would document every square inch of this place. I would create a map of the real. I started in the bathroom. The flash was a harsh, blue-white explosion in the small space. Click. The shower. Click. The empty space where she had been standing. Click. The hallway outside. My own wet footprints were dark splotches on the floor. I photographed them. I moved into the main room. Click. The couch. Click. The desk. The gray mug was still on the left side, the dark ring of moisture beneath it now a permanent stain on the wood. I took 3 pictures of it from different angles. Click. 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 I photographed the bookshelf, deliberately capturing the empty space where the music box had been. I photographed the music box on the floor, its lid agape. I was creating a record, an unassailable timeline of objects in space. See? The box is there. The mug is there. The door is locked. I am here. This is reality. I was aiming the phone at the kitchen alcove when the main overhead light flickered. It went off, then on again, a single, violent blink. The filament in the bulb buzzed loudly for a second. I froze, my finger hovering over the shutter button. I lowered the phone slowly. And then, the light did it again, flickering with a sick, buzzing stutter before it popped. Darkness. It was complete. A heavy, suffocating black that swallowed everything. The only light was the small, focused beam from my phone's flashlight, which had turned on automatically with the camera. The beam cut a sharp, nervous circle on the kitchen cabinets. My breathing was the only sound. A ragged, unsteady rhythm in the new dark. The power was out. Just the breaker. A surge. A normal, boring, electrical failure. I repeated the words in my head. A normal failure. Then I heard the whistling. It came from the bedroom. It was a light, cheerful tune, the kind of simple, mindless ditty someone would whistle on a sunny day. Each note was clear and perfectly formed. It was slow, unhurried, confident. The sound slid through the dark apartment and wrapped around me. It was the most human sound I had heard all day, and the most terrifying. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a memory. It was a person. A person in my bedroom, in the dark, whistling. My blood turned to ice. My entire body locked up. The phone in my hand felt impossibly heavy. The circle of light from its flashlight jittered, dancing on the wall. The whistling didn't stop. It continued its happy little tune, a calm and steady presence in the black. It knew I was there. It knew I could hear it. Anger, white-hot and pure, surged through me. It was a chemical reaction to the fear. It burned away the paralysis. I was not going to stand here and listen. I was not going to be the mouse. I raised the phone, gripping it like a club. The light beam became my weapon. My eyes. I took a step toward the bedroom, my bare foot making a soft, wet sound on the wood. The whistling continued, oblivious. Or pretending to be. Another step. My heart was a fist, beating against the inside of my ribs. The hallway to the bedroom was a short, dark throat. I reached the doorway. The whistling was louder here, just on the other side of the door, which was slightly ajar. I planted my feet. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I didn't shout. I didn't make a sound. I just acted. I shoved the door with all my strength. It flew open, slamming against the interior wall with a crack of wood that echoed like a gunshot. The whistling stopped. It cut off mid-note, leaving a perfect silence in its place. The beam from my phone sliced through the darkness, frantically sweeping across the room. The bed. The closed window. The small closet. The cheap dresser. It was empty. There was nowhere to hide. The beam came back to the bed. It was a queen-size mattress on a simple metal frame. The covers were still turned down from the morning, and in the center of the mattress there was an impression. It was the distinct, deep indentation of a person's body. The shape of someone who had been sitting on the edge of the bed, legs dangling, moments ago. As I held the light on it, my hand shaking, I watched the fabric. It was moving. The deep creases were slowly, smoothly, uncannily rising. The depression was filling itself out. The foam beneath the fabric, expanding back to its original shape. It was as if the person sitting there hadn't gotten up, but had simply evaporated. A low, guttural sound escaped my throat. I stumbled backward, away from that slowly rising shape. My heel caught on the edge of the rug. My balance was gone. I fell hard, my head hitting the doorframe. The phone flew from my grasp, skittering across the floor with a plastic clatter. It came to rest near the wall, the flashlight beam pointing straight up. The light cast a stark, white circle on the ceiling. It illuminated dust, the cheap popcorn texture of the plaster, and a series of small, defined shapes. They were footprints. Tiny. Barefoot. And they were wet. They made a neat, deliberate trail across the white ceiling. The trail started from a spot directly above the bed and walked, step by impossible step, to a point on the ceiling right over my head, where I now sat on the floor. The last two prints were still glistening. The wet prints on the ceiling did not drip. I stared, waiting for them to. A drop of water on my cheek would make this real in a way I could not deny. But nothing fell. The ceiling was a flat white surface and the footprints were dark stains against it, a map of an impossible journey. They were there. I saw them. The light from my phone's fallen flashlight held them in a perfect, unwavering circle. Two of them, directly above me, looked darker than the rest. Fresher. My head throbbed where it had hit the doorframe. A dull, rhythmic beat that matched the pounding in my chest. The world was a small circle of light on a ceiling, and the vast, pressing dark all around it. I couldn't stay on the floor. I crawled. My knees scraped against the wood grain, collecting splinters. My bare skin was cold, clammy with sweat that had nothing to do with the earlier shower. I moved out of the bedroom doorway, away from the spot beneath the footprints. My hand found my phone on the floor. I snatched it up. The beam of light became mine again, a frantic weapon I swept across the living room. It was the same. The couch. The desk. The music box still on the floor, lid open. Nothing had changed. Except everything had. The power was still out. The whistling was gone. The impression on the bed was gone. But the footprints were on the ceiling, and the memory of the whistling was a hook in my brain. That wasn't a sound from a box. It was lungs. A mouth. A person. My own breathing was loud in the total quiet. I needed a weapon. Not my phone. Something better. I pushed myself up, using the arm of the sofa for support. My legs shook. I made my way to the kitchen alcove, my thumb keeping the flashlight beam pointed ahead. The block of knives sat on the counter, a dark shape holding other, sharper shapes. I pulled out the chef's knife. It was heavy. The handle was smooth plastic, the blade long and silver where it caught the light. It felt stupid and theatrical. It also felt necessary. I didn't go back to the bedroom. I would not enter that room again tonight. I retreated to the sofa, the farthest point from the bedroom and the front door. I sat down, sinking into the cheap cushions. I put the knife on the cushion beside me, its blade pointing away. I faced the front door. I put my phone on the coffee table, the beam aimed at the door. A weak spotlight on the only way in or out. And I waited. My mind raced, trying to build a wall of logic to hide behind. A transient got into the building, picked the lock while I was in the shower. A squatter. They were in the bedroom when the power blew. They whistled to keep calm. I burst in. They panicked, slipped out past me in the dark when I fell. It was a person. A weird, quiet, light-footed person. The footprints on the ceiling? A trick of the light. A water stain that had always been there, that I had only just noticed. The impression on the bed? My mind filling in blanks. All of it. Stress. A new city. A new apartment. No sleep. I was making it up. I had to be. I sat there for an hour. Maybe 2. Time was a thick, slow liquid. The only movement was the dust motes dancing in the cone of light from my phone. I felt my eyelids get heavy. Exhaustion was a physical weight, pressing me down. My fear was being eroded by sheer fatigue. I was a man with a kitchen knife, hiding from a water stain in his own apartment. The thought was so pathetic it almost made me laugh. Then I heard it. It wasn't loud. It wasn't in my apartment. It was a murmur, coming through the wall to my left, the shared wall with 404. I tilted my head, straining to listen. At first, it was just a low hum of speech, the cadence of conversation without the words. Then, a single voice rose just enough to become clear. A woman's voice. May's voice. He seemed scared, poor thing. The words were as clear as if she were standing next to me. They were spoken with a kind of soft, pitying tone. The sound went through me, a current of ice. She was talking about me. She had to be. My heart, which had just begun to slow, started hammering again. I stayed perfectly still, my hand creeping over to the handle of the knife beside me. Then a second sound followed her words. It wasn't another woman. It was a laugh. A low, quiet chuckle. A man's laugh. It was a short, breathy sound, full of a deep, rumbling amusement. It was the last thing I expected to hear. I had never heard a man in that apartment. I had never heard anything from that apartment but her. The laugh ended. The murmuring started again, too low to make out. They were in there, in 404, talking. Talking about me. The pity in her voice, the amusement in his. They were watching. They knew. A surge of hot, clean anger flooded my veins. It burned away the cold fear. It was a relief. I was not going to be the poor thing. I was not a source of amusement. I scrambled off the sofa, my bare feet slapping against the floor. I didn't care about being quiet anymore. I went to the wall, the thin sheet of drywall that separated my world from theirs. I could feel the faint vibration of their voices through the plaster. I drew back my fist. "Shut up!" The yell tore out of my throat, raw and loud. I slammed my fist into the wall. A sharp pain shot up my arm and the drywall gave a dull thud. On the other side of the wall, the talking stopped. Instantly. The silence was sudden and complete. It was heavier than the silence before, a listening silence. I stood there, breathing hard, my knuckles stinging. My own shout echoed in my ears. I waited for them to yell back, to bang on the wall in return. Nothing. The silence stretched, becoming a presence in itself. I pressed my ear against the wall, straining to hear a whisper, a footstep, anything. There was only the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. I leaned my head against the cool plaster, closing my eyes. What had I done? I was the one yelling now. I was the crazy neighbor. Maybe Mark was right. I needed to call someone. Thump. The sound was soft, but definite. It came from the other side of the wall. It was right against my ear, as if someone had placed a fist gently on the plaster exactly where my head was resting. I pulled back, as if the wall were electrified. Thump. It came again. Slower this time. Deliberate. A single, dull knock. It wasn't an angry bang, it was measured. Calm. Thump. My breath caught in my throat. This was a conversation. I had yelled, and this was the reply. It was slow. Confident. I backed away from the wall, my eyes wide in the dark. I retreated step by step until my back hit the opposite wall. The knocking continued, a steady, Unhurried rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. It was the sound of someone who had all the time in the world. It knew I was listening. It didn't need to be loud. Then it stopped. The sudden absence of the sound was as loud as its presence had been. The apartment was still again. My eyes were locked on the wall, waiting. But the sound didn't come from the wall. It came from the front door. A thin, metallic scrape. The sound of a key sliding into a lock. My lock. Ice flooded my body. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It was one thing to hear them through the wall. It was another thing entirely to hear them at my door. My locked door. The light from my phone was still pointed there, illuminating the deadbolt and the handle. I watched, paralyzed, as the deadbolt knob began to turn. It moved slowly, smoothly, with a final, soft clack as it unlocked completely. My brain screamed. Run! Hide! Fight! I dove. Not toward the door, not toward the bedroom. I threw myself to the floor, scrambling behind the sofa. Just as the doorknob began to turn, I pressed myself flat against the floorboards, my body tucked into the narrow space between the sofa and the wall. My cheek was pressed to the dusty floor. I held the knife in a white-knuckled grip, its blade pointed toward the open room. The door swung inward with a low groan. It opened only halfway and then stopped. A silhouette stood in the doorway, framed against the dim, yellow light of the apartment hallway. It was a woman's shape. Slender. She stood there for a long moment, perfectly still. Then, she stepped inside. She moved without a sound. Her feet made no noise on the wood floor. I could see them under the sofa. Bare feet. The hem of a simple dress, just like the one I had seen in the mirror's reflection. She walked into the center of the room, into the beam of my phone's flashlight, and she began to hum. It was the melody from the music box. A light, simple tune, hummed softly, calmly. She walked a slow circle in the center of the room. Her bare feet were pale in the light. She looked at the desk. She looked toward the bedroom. Her movements were unhurried, as if she were inspecting the place, taking inventory. My entire world was the patch of floor I could see under the couch, her feet, and the terrifying, gentle sound of her humming. My heart was a frantic drum against the floorboards. I was sure she could hear it. I was sure she could see me. Her humming stopped. Her feet stopped. She was standing directly in front of the sofa, facing it. Facing me. I could see the bottoms of her feet, her toes pointed right at my hiding place. This was it. She knew. She was going to lean over. But she didn't. She turned. Her feet pivoted, and she walked toward the kitchen alcove, away from me. I heard her steps now, soft against the linoleum. I heard the faint rustle of her dress. Then I heard a new sound. The sound of knives shifting in the wooden block. A soft, wooden clatter. Then a high, clear shing. The sound of a long blade being drawn from its slot. My blood ran cold. I knew which one it was. It was the one with the most heft. The one I had left on the counter just before choosing my own. I squeezed my eyes shut. I waited for the footsteps to come back. I waited for the pain. The footsteps came, soft, silent again on the wood floor. They stopped at the coffee table, right in front of the sofa. Right in front of my face. There was a pause. Then, a soft, deliberate clink. The sound of metal being placed on wood. She did not wait. She turned and walked back to the front door. The silhouette appeared again, then stepped out. The door swung shut with a gentle click, leaving me in the dark and the quiet once more. It took a full minute for me to dare to move. My muscles were locked. My jaw ached from clenching it. I slowly, carefully, raised my head. I peered over the edge of the sofa cushion. The room was as it was. The door was closed. But on the coffee table, in the center of the light beam from my phone, lay the knife from the kitchen. It was the largest one from the block. Its blade was 10 inches long, clean and gleaming. It was placed perfectly parallel to the edge of the table. Its tip was pointed directly at me. I did not move. Time stopped. My world was the gleam of the knife on the coffee table, and the dust motes swimming in the beam of my phone. The air was cold, but sweat traced a path down my spine. That knife was not a gift, it was a statement. I was in your kitchen. I chose your weapon. Now it is mine. It pointed at my chest, a silver finger of accusation. I wasn't hiding from a stain on the ceiling anymore. I was hiding from her. A real person. A woman who could pick my lock, walk through my home, and leave a threat on my coffee table without a sound. The paralysis broke. Not with a surge of anger, but with a cold, clear certainty. Get out. Now. I pushed myself up from behind the sofa. My joints screamed in protest. I kept my eyes on the front door, half expecting the knob to turn again. I grabbed my phone from the table, my fingers fumbling, almost dropping it. I didn't touch the knife. I left it there, a monument to my own foolishness. The light from my phone felt flimsy, a pathetic defense. My backpack was in the bedroom closet. The bedroom. The room with the footprints on the ceiling. I had to go in there. The thought was a physical weight. My feet refused to move. Just leave, a part of my brain screamed. Leave everything. Just walk out the door. But my keys, my wallet, they were on the desk. In the living room, my wallet, my keys, my phone. That was enough. I didn't need clothes. I didn't need anything else. I stuffed my wallet into the pocket of my jeans. My hand closed around the car key. I backed away from the coffee table, toward the front door. My every muscle tensed for a sound, a movement. The apartment was still. Too still. I reached the door, my hand hovering over the deadbolt. It was unlocked. She had left it unlocked. I could just turn the knob and... The smell hit me then. It cut through the stale, dusty air of the apartment. It was rich, dark, and warm. Coffee. A fresh pot. It was my favorite kind. The dark roast I kept in the canister by the sink. For a single, stupid second, it was comforting. A familiar scent in the middle of a nightmare. Then the reality crashed down. The percolator was unplugged. I had unplugged it myself this morning after I used it. I turned, sweeping the flashlight beam toward the kitchen alcove. Steam was rising in a lazy curl from a full mug sitting on the counter. The red power light on the machine glowed. She hadn't just come in. She hadn't just left a knife. She had stayed. She had taken her time. She had made coffee. My breath hitched. The front door was 5 feet away, but it felt like a mile across a frozen lake. My gaze dropped from the mug to my backpack, which I'd left on the floor by the desk when I came home. There was something on it. A piece of paper. A white square against the dark canvas. It had not been there before. I moved toward it, my steps slow, my body rigid. I felt like a bomb disposal expert approaching a device. I bent down. It was a piece of notepaper, torn from a small pad. Written on it in neat, looping cursive were 5 words. Stay. We're not done yet. The polite script was 100 times more terrifying than a scrawl. It was calm. It was confident. We. A man's laugh through the wall. We. I straightened up, the note falling from my fingers. The air was gone from the room. My lungs burned for a real breath. Fuck the backpack. Fuck the coffee. Fuck the note. I spun around and lunged for the front door. Not walking, not backing away. A full, desperate scramble. My hand closed around the doorknob. It was cold, solid brass. I twisted. It did not move. I twisted again, harder, putting my shoulder into it. Nothing. It was like trying to turn a knob carved from the same single piece of steel as the door and frame. It didn't rattle. It didn't give. It was just solid. It didn't feel locked. It felt like it was no longer a mechanism. It had been fused shut. Panic, hot and sharp, exploded in my chest. No, 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 no. The words were a choked whisper. I rattled the knob, my whole body shaking with the effort. I slammed my fist against the wood of the door. The sound was a dull, meaty thud. The lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then they went out completely, plunging me into absolute blackness. My phone. I had dropped it when I lunged for the door. It was on the floor somewhere. Stay. The voice was a whisper, right beside my left ear. May's voice. I flinched, spinning around, swinging my empty hands at the darkness. I hit nothing. "Stay with us." The same whisper, but now from my right. It was coming from everywhere. It was in the air. The main light in the living room flickered back on, buzzing loudly. It cast long, dancing shadows across the room. It wasn't a steady light. It was a violent, strobing pulse. On, off, on, off. In the strobing flashes, the room seemed to jerk and twitch. "Stay." This time it wasn't a whisper. It was a chorus. Dozens of voices, all hers, layered on top of each other, coming from the walls, the ceiling, the floor, a discordant harmony of the same word, echoing in the strobing light. The sound vibrated through the floorboards, up my legs. I scrambled backwards, away from the door, my eyes wide, trying to make sense of the flashing images of my own apartment, the knife on the table, the steaming mug, the note on the floor, the window. There was another way out. The fire escape. It was my only chance. I didn't think. I acted. In one of the fleeting moments of light, I saw the wooden chair at my small dining table. I grabbed it. It was light, flimsy, but it was solid. I hefted it, my knuckles white on the smooth wood of the backrest. The strobing continued, a mad disco beat for my own execution. The chorus of "Stay" grew louder, more insistent, pressing in on me. I ran at the window. It was a large single pane of glass, looking out onto the rusted metal of the fire escape, 4 stories above the alley. I raised the chair over my head, my muscles screaming with the strain and the terror. I put every ounce of my weight, my fear, my desperation into the swing. "Fuck you!" I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. The legs of the chair met the glass with a deep, resonant thud that shook my entire arm. The impact shuddered up my bones. My hands stung. The glass did not break. It did not crack or shatter. It bent. For a split second, under the awful strobing light, I saw the pane of glass bulge outwards, flexing like a sheet of hard rubber. It rippled, the reflection of my living room warping and twisting as if I were looking at it through water. A low, groaning sound came from the window frame, a sound of stressed metal and wood. The entire wall around it seemed to creak, a deep, structural complaint from the bones of the building itself. The walls, in the flashes of light, looked like they were breathing, swelling in and out by a bare inch, a slow, horrifying pulsation that matched the chorus of voices. I stumbled back, dropping the chair. It clattered to the floor. The window settled back into a flat plane, perfectly intact. The walls stopped their movement. The strobing light died, leaving only the steady, pale glow from my phone's screen on the floor near the door. The chorus of whispers vanished. The silence was a physical blow. I fell to my knees. It was over. I was a rat in a box, and the box was alive. Or she was everywhere. It didn't matter which was true. The result was the same. There was no escape. The door was sealed. The window was impossible. A sob escaped me, a raw, ugly sound. I crawled on my hands and knees over to my phone, my last link to a world that made sense. I picked it up. My hands were shaking so badly it took 2 tries. I just wanted to see a familiar screen. A picture of a mountain I had set as the wallpaper months ago, a piece of the old world. The screen was black. Then it lit up. It wasn't the mountain, it was a live photo. It was a video, a few seconds long, playing on a loop. The viewpoint was from high up, near the corner where the ceiling met the 2 walls, looking down. The angle of a security camera. It was filming the room I was in. It was filming me. I watched, frozen, as the tiny figure on the screen, a man in a dark t-shirt and jeans, crawled across the floor. I watched him fall to his knees. I watched his shoulders shake as he began to cry, his face buried in his hands. I watched myself, right now, in this moment, broken and defeated on the floor of my apartment. The video was perfectly clear, perfectly steady. It captured my every shudder, my every hitched breath. It was a recording of my final shred of hope dying. My thumb was still on the screen. The loop finished. The photo became still, a single perfect high-resolution image of me, crying on the floor, trapped, watched, alone. I remained on the floor. The phone lay screen down beside my head, a dead black rectangle. The light from the single buzzing bulb in the ceiling fixture was a harsh, yellow sickness. It painted the room in strokes of grime and shadow. My cheek was pressed to the carpet, and I could feel the stiff fibers against my skin, could smell the dust of a dozen tenants before me. My tears had dried into stiff tracks on my face. The sobs had subsided into a hollow ache in my chest. The world had ended, not with a bang, but with a video file. Proof. Not of ghosts, but of my own isolation. A perfect, looped recording of a man breaking. Time lost its edges. Was it hours or a day that I lay there? I do not know. Hunger eventually became a dull, physical command. I pushed myself up. My joints creaked, my muscles stiff and sore from the fall and the tension. The apartment was as I had left it. The knife was on the table, a venomous silver sliver. The mug of coffee was on the counter, the liquid now cold and black. The note lay on the floor near my backpack. Stay. We're not done yet. I did not touch them. I gave them a wide berth, my movements slow, weary. I was a prisoner mapping the boundaries of his cell. I went to the kitchen. I opened a can of beans and ate them cold, leaning against the counter, the metallic tang of the can sharp on my tongue. I drank water from the tap. It tasted of pipes and chemicals. I did not sleep in the bedroom. I dragged the cushions from the sofa and made a bed on the floor in the living room, as far from the front door as possible, my back against the wall. The days that followed blurred into one another. A smear of gray light through the dirty window and the sickly yellow of the buzzing bulb at night. The building stopped its overt assaults. There were no more strobing lights, no more choruses of disembodied voices. The attacks became smaller, more intimate. A quiet sort of erosion. One morning I woke to the scent of lilacs, thick and sweet, on my pillowcase, though I owned no air freshener, no cologne. It was the scent May wore. I threw the pillow across the room. Another afternoon, as I sat staring at the wall, I heard the distinct sound of a fork scraping against a ceramic plate from the apartment next door. A soft, leisurely sound. The apartment next door was vacant. It had been for 6 months. I stopped reacting. The fear was still there, a low hum beneath my ribs, but the sharp edges of panic had been worn down by exhaustion. I was becoming accustomed to the cage. I moved through the small space in a stupor, a ghost in my own life. The trash piled up. A fine layer of dust settled on every surface, including me. I did not shower. I did not change my clothes. What was the point? There was no outside world. There was only this room, this building. It was watching me, listening to me, and it wanted me to stay. I was its pet, its project. One day, the 4th day, or maybe the 5th, a chill set into the apartment. It was a damp, deep cold that had nothing to do with the weather outside. It sank into my bones. I needed another blanket. The thought was a simple, animal impulse. I remembered a spare one, thick wool, packed away in the bedroom closet. The bedroom. I had not entered it since the night it all began. Since the sight of my own defeat played out on my phone screen. My feet were heavy as I pushed the door open. The air inside was stale. The closet was deep, a walk-in space that smelled of cedar and mothballs. I fumbled for the pull-cord light. A bare bulb flickered on, illuminating shelves of my own folded clothes, looking like relics from another man's life. At the very back, on the floor, was a cardboard box. The blanket should have been in there. I knelt down, the floorboards cold against my knees. I pulled the box forward. It was lighter than I expected. As I shifted my weight, my hand slid off the box and pressed against the floor beside it. One of the floorboards moved. It was a slight give, 1/4 of an inch, but it was there. I paused. The humming in my ribs picked up its tempo. I pressed again, deliberately this time. The board sank under my weight with a low groan of old wood. Curiosity, the first active feeling I'd had in days, cut through the fog. My fingers, grimy and trembling slightly, searched for an edge. I found a splintered corner and pulled. The board came up with surprising ease. It wasn't nailed down. Beneath it was a small, dark cavity, and in the cavity, something metal. I reached in, my fingers brushing against cold, flaking rust. I lifted it out. It was a tin box, the kind that used to hold biscuits or tea. Its painted flowers faded and scratched. The lid was stiff. I had to pry it open with my car key. the metal scraping against metal. Inside, nestled on a bed of yellowed tissue paper, was a small spiral-bound notebook and a few folded squares of newspaper. The air that escaped the box smelled of dry paper and faint perfume, the same lilac scent from my pillow. My breath caught in my throat. I took the box and its contents back to the living room, setting them down in the pool of yellow light from the lamp. I sat on the floor and opened the notebook. The first page was written in a round, bubbly cursive, the blue ink still vibrant. August 12th. I'm in. Apartment 302. My very own place. It's perfect. A little old, but it has character. The light in the afternoon is just gorgeous. I think I'm going to be so happy here. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. This was my apartment. 302. I turned the page. August 19th. Met one of the neighbors today. A very kind, older woman. She lives in 402, just upstairs. She brought me a little succulent as a welcome gift. Said her name was May. So sweet. My heart hammered against my ribs. May. Apartment 402. But there was no 402. The building only had 3 floors. I knew this. I had seen the building directory. It stopped at 306. I kept reading, my hands shaking. The entries documented the first few weeks. They were filled with the same small joys and frustrations of moving into a new place. Then the tone began to shift. The handwriting grew a little less neat. September 5th. The strangest thing. I can't find the succulent May gave me. I know I put it on the windowsill. I've looked everywhere. She asked about it in the hall and I felt so foolish. I must be more stressed than I thought. September 21st. I came home and the kettle was on. I know I unplugged it. I always do. When I saw May later, I mentioned it, trying to make a joke about being forgetful. She just smiled and said, "The building has its little quirks." It wasn't a comforting thing to say. The neat cursive was gone now, replaced by a tight, slanted script. The pressure of the pen had dug into the paper. October 11th. She's in here. I know she is. I leave for work and when I come back, things are moved. Not big things. A book turned to a different page. A mug left in the sink that I know I washed. A little note on the counter that just says, "Hello," and then it's gone an hour later. I feel like I am losing my mind. I put a new lock on the door. It made no difference. October 29th. I am so alone. My friends think I'm exaggerating. My mom thinks I'm not sleeping enough. May is the only one who seems to understand. She brings me tea. She tells me to just relax. But sometimes, when she looks at me, her eyes are hungry. I don't know how else to describe it. I told her I was thinking of moving. She looked so sad. She said, "Oh, but we're just getting to know each other." My blood was ice. I unfolded one of the newspaper clippings. It was from the local Gazette, dated a year ago. The paper was brittle. A grainy photograph showed a smiling young woman with dark hair. The headline read, "Police seek information on missing local woman." The name was Maya Collins. Last known address, 1214 North Oak Street, apartment 302. A choked sound escaped my throat. I let the clipping fall. This was her. This was the person the building had consumed before me. May wasn't the first ghost. Maya was. And the building, the thing calling itself May, had played the same game with her. My eyes fell on the last written page of the diary. The handwriting was a barely legible scrawl, letters crashing into each other, the ink smudged as if by tears or sweat. It was a final, desperate confession. It's the house. It's not May. It's the whole building. It's alive, and it's hungry. It made me leave the gifts for you. It made me write the notes. It's making me write this now. It wants you to know the truth. It says fear tastes better with understanding. The fear is the point. It's food. It's getting stronger. And now it has a new game. A new friend for you. He'll be coming for you, Liam. The man in 402. The name on the page was wrong. It wasn't my name. My name is... My thoughts snagged. The world tilted. The name on the page was not Liam. The last sentence was, "He'll be coming for you, Mark." The man in 402. I blinked. My name is Mark, not Liam. Why did I think my name was Liam? The confusion was a physical blow, a wave of dizziness that made the room swim. Then I heard it. Liam! The voice was not a whisper. It was a deep, resonant baritone. It came from the hallway, just outside my front door. It was calm, conversational. It was the voice of a real man. "Liam, I know you're in there. open the door. We have so much to talk about. The diary slipped from my numb fingers. My head was spinning. Liam? Mark? Who was Mark? Who was Liam? The voice outside the door was calling a name that felt both foreign and familiar. A part of my mind screamed recognition, while another part recoiled in confusion. My trembling hand reached for the diary again. I didn't open it to the last entry. My fingers, acting on their own, flipped to the very last page of the entire notebook. A page she could not have written on, because it came after her final, terrified message. The page was not blank. It was filled, from top to bottom, with a single word, written over and over again, in a thick, angry scrawl. The pen strokes were heavy, gouged into the paper. Liam. 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 I stared at it, at the hundreds of repetitions of the name. I recognized the sharp, aggressive slant of the L, the hurried loop of the A. It was my handwriting. It was my name, written on the page, in my own hand. I did not remember writing it. I did not remember anything at all. The name on the page was Liam. My name. In my handwriting. Repetition was a form of madness, the frantic carving of a word into a surface until it lost all meaning and became a shape, an obsession. Liam. 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 The voice in the hall was saying the name. My name. The diary in my hands, written by a dead woman, was telling me about a man named Mark, who was not me. My name is Liam. Dizziness hit me. A gray wash over my vision, the yellow lamplight shrinking to a pinprick. I put a hand against the floor to steady myself. The rough texture of the carpet fibers dug into my palm. My head was a bell jar, and two opposing thoughts were screaming inside it, cracking the glass. I am Liam. I am not Liam. Liam. The voice at the door was lower now, intimate, patient. I made coffee, your favorite, the dark roast. Come on out. The scent of it hit me then. Not the sour, stale coffee in the mug on my kitchen counter. This was fresh. A rich, dark aroma that crept under the door. A phantom limb reaching for me. It smelled like home, like a morning that was not this one. It smelled like a lie. The diary was a dead weight in my lap. It says fear tastes better with understanding. The fear is the point. It's food. The click of the lock on my own door turning. Not the deadbolt. The simple knob lock. I had not locked it. A soft snick. Then silence. A moment passed. Another. Then the sound of footsteps, slow and unhurried, moving away down the hall. He was gone. The invitation was rescinded. The game had moved to a new phase. For a long time, I did not move. The coffee smell faded. The world was reduced to the apartment, the buzzing light, the book in my lap. A switch flipped in my head. The hollow ache in my chest, the fog of exhaustion. They burned away, replaced by something clean and sharp. Anger. A cold, pure fury that cut through the confusion. Maya wasn't a ghost haunting me. She was a message in a bottle. A warning. The thing calling itself May, the polite notes, the moving objects, the voice in the hall. It wasn't one entity. It was the building. It was this structure of brick and plaster and rotten wood. It was an organism. And I was the bacteria it was trying to digest. The realization didn't bring more fear. It brought a target. You can't fight a ghost. You can't reason with a memory. But a building has weaknesses. It has bones. It has a heart. I scrambled back to the closet, to the cardboard box. The cold from the floorboards seeped through the knees of my jeans. My hands, still trembling but now with adrenaline instead of terror, rummaged through the box again. Underneath the yellowed tissue paper, my fingers brushed against a hard edge. I pulled at it. A false bottom. A flimsy piece of cardboard came away, revealing another small cavity beneath. Inside was a tight roll of brittle, yellowed paper, tied with a piece of twine that crumbled to dust at my touch. I carried it back to the living room and unrolled it on the floor. It was a blueprint, faded blue lines on a cracked sepia background. North Oak Street Residential Building, 1928. My eyes scanned the document, my breath held tight in my chest. First floor. Second floor. Third floor. No fourth floor. No apartment 402, but below the ground floor there was another level. Basement level. Utilities. My finger, smudged with dirt, traced the lines. It followed a diagram of pipes and wiring to a large square room in the very center of the foundation. The room was labeled in a different, spidery script, an addition made in pencil long after the original printing. Boiler room. Beside the label were two small, hand-drawn symbols. A circle, and a spiral leading into its center. A drain. A maw. The moment I understood what I was looking at, what I had to do, the light bulb above my head popped. Not a flicker. A loud, sharp crack like a gunshot, and the room was plunged into near-total darkness. Glass rained down on the carpet. For a second, I was frozen, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. It knew. The building knew what I was thinking. The hope was a flare in the dark, and it had seen it. Fine. Let it see. I crawled across the floor, my hands sweeping in front of me until I found my phone. The screen flared to life, a small, cold island of light. 4%. The battery wouldn't last. I didn't need it to. I just needed to get to the basement. I got to my feet, the world a shifting landscape of shadows thrown by the tiny phone screen. The blueprint was on the floor. The diary was there. Evidence. Proof. But not for anyone else, just for me. I pulled open my apartment door. The hallway was darker than it should have been. The single safety light at the far end was dead. The only illumination came from the slivers of moonlight filtering through the grimy window on the landing. The air was heavy. Cold. I took a step out. The door clicked shut behind me. I didn't have a key. It didn't matter. I wasn't coming back. The elevator was my first thought. The quickest way down. I pushed the button. There was no sound, no light. I pushed it again, harder, the plastic groaning under my thumb. Nothing. I put my ear to the metal doors. Silence. It was dead. Or it was refusing. The stairwell door was heavy, its pneumatic hinge sighing as it closed behind me. The darkness in here was absolute. I held my phone up. The beam cut a narrow, dancing cone through the black. Dust motes swirled like tiny insects. The concrete steps descended into a void. I took the first step down. My sneakers scraped against the gritty surface. The sound was unnervingly loud. One flight down. The door to the second floor. The metal plate on the wall read, 2. Good. My light caught a dark, ugly stain on the wall, a spidery network of cracks around it. I kept going. Down. The air grew colder, damper. It smelled of wet concrete and something else. Something metallic and sweet. The smell of old blood. Another flight. I reached the landing. I shone the light on the wall. The metal plate read, 2. I stopped. My blood ran cold. No, that wasn't right. I had just passed the second floor. I looked back up the stairs, into the suffocating darkness. I looked down. It was the same stairwell. This had to be the first floor. A mistake. A trick of the light. I continued down, my steps faster now. My breathing was loud in my ears. The phone felt slippery in my sweaty hand. I descended another full flight, my legs aching with the tension. The next landing. I swung the phone's light toward the wall. The metal plate read, 2. The same stain. The same cracks. I touched the wall, my fingers tracing the familiar shape. It was real. Cold, solid plaster. I was not moving. Or I was walking in place. The building was playing with me, warping its own geometry to keep me in a loop. A sound from above. Scrape. I froze. The sound was faint. Metal on concrete. Drag. A long, slow, heavy sound. Like a bag of cement being pulled across the floor. It came from far above me. From the third floor. Or what should have been the third floor. scrape, drag. He was coming. The man from 402. The hunter. The building was not just trapping me, it was hurting me. Panic seized me. I threw myself down the stairs, no longer caring about the numbers on the wall. I ran, my feet pounding, the foam light bouncing wildly, painting fractured, terrifying images on the walls. Stairs and rails and darkness and the sound from above, closer now, a steady, relentless rhythm. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. The sound of something broken and heavy, and it was coming for me. My foot caught on a step, and I pitched forward, tumbling down the last few stairs, landing in a heap on a solid floor. The phone flew from my hand and skittered across the concrete, its light spinning before coming to rest against a wall, pointing back up the stairwell I had just fallen out of. I was on the ground floor. I could see the faint outline of the mailboxes, the front door. I scrambled to my feet, gasping for air. The scraping sound had stopped. There. Across the lobby, set deep into the wall, under the main staircase, a single, heavy, metal door. No handle. No knob. Just a small, barred window at eye level. And a chain. A thick, industrial-grade chain, each link as thick as my wrist, was wrapped around the door and the wall frame multiple times, secured by a massive, rust-covered padlock. The air shifted. The smell hit me, not blood this time. Damp, rich soil. The smell of a freshly dug grave. The smell of rot. I turned back toward the stairwell. My phone's light illuminated the bottom of the steps. 2 feet became visible at the top of the short flight I had just fallen down. Not shoes. They were bare, caked in dirt, the toenails yellow and thick. Then the legs, covered in what looked like a janitor's work pants, but the fabric was stained dark with grime and something wet. He took a step down. The sound was not a step. It was the wet, slapping sound of a dead weight hitting the concrete. He was not walking. He was lurching, his body moving with a jerky, unnatural gait. The scraping sound returned. It was the sound of his other foot, twisted at a sickening angle, dragging uselessly behind him. I couldn't scream. My throat was clamped shut. I stumbled backwards, my eyes fixed on the thing emerging from the darkness. A tall, stooped figure. Its head was too low, its shoulders hunched up around its ears. It wore the tattered remains of a blue work shirt. One arm hung long at its side, the fingers brushing the floor. The other was bent, held close to its chest. It moved into the lobby, dragging its dead leg, the scraping sound echoing in the cavernous space. It didn't look at me. It didn't seem to know I was there. Its head was down, its attention fixed on the floor in front of it. I needed to hide. My eyes darted around the lobby, a dark recess beside the dead elevator shaft. A shallow alcove where a reception desk might have been 50 years ago. I backed into it, pressing myself against the cold, grimy wall, trying to melt into the shadows. I held my breath. The rotten earth smell was overpowering now. It was the smell of him, of the thing shuffling across the lobby. It stopped. It stood directly in front of the chained basement door, its back to me. For a long, silent moment, it just stood there, a crooked silhouette against the gloom. I could hear its breathing. A wet, rattling sound, like air being forced through water. Then, it moved. The arm it had held close to its chest came up. Its hand reached into the pocket of its filthy pants. A sound cut through the silence. A soft, clear, metallic jingle. Not the sound of old, rusted keys. The sound of modern keys on a metal ring. The figure fumbled for a moment. Its hand emerged from the pocket holding a single key. Not a great Gothic skeleton key to match the ancient chain. It was a small, brass-colored key. A Schlage. The kind of key I had for my own apartment door. With a slowness that was terrifying in its deliberation, the thing slotted the modern key into the rusted padlock. There was a quiet, well-oiled click. The lock sprang open. The creature let it fall to the floor with a heavy thud. Then, link by heavy link, it began to unwrap the chain. The noise was immense, a rattling, clanking roar of metal on metal that filled the entire space. It unwound the last of it, letting the end fall with a crash. It put a hand on the metal door. It pulled. The door opened inwards with a deep groan of complaint, revealing a square of utter blackness. The creature did not hesitate. It lurched forward, dragging its ruined leg over the threshold. It disappeared into the dark. I stayed pressed against the wall, my muscles screaming, my heart hammering. I waited. From inside the blackness, I heard a sound. The heavy thud of a metal bar sliding into place. A final, definitive click as a lock engaged from the other side. He hadn't been locked out. He wasn't trying to get in, he was the keeper. He had the key. This wasn't a prison to him, it was home. And he had just locked the door behind him. The door was locked. The sound of the bolt sliding home was a period at the end of a sentence. My sentence. I was on the floor, the cold tile of the lobby sucking the warmth from my body through my jeans. A laugh came out of my throat. It was not a sound of humor. It was a dry, rasping noise, like stones grinding together. It was the only sound in the lobby. The keeper was home. I was locked out. Or locked in. It made no difference. I had lost. The thought was simple. It carried no weight. It was just a fact, like the fact that the floor was hard and the air smelled of wet earth. I pushed myself up, my palms scraping on the grimy tile. My phone's light was gone. The screen was a black mirror. It had died, and with it, the last piece of the world I knew. The only light came from the street. A sick orange glow filtering through the front door's wired glass. It cast long, dancing shadows that made the corners of the lobby seem to shift and breathe. I stayed on my knees for a moment, waiting. For what? I did not know. For the sound of the shuffling to return. For the door to open again. Nothing happened. The building was waiting too. Then I saw it. Not a thing, but a change in the light. Near the base of the main staircase, the air seemed to waver, to thicken. It was like heat haze on a summer road, but there was no heat here. The air was cold. The shimmering coalesced. It took a shape. A human shape. A woman. Her form was made of moonlight and dust motes, a fragile projection that barely held together. Maya. Her face was a canvas of terror. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. She was not the thing that had tormented me. She was a victim, same as me. A previous iteration of the experiment. Her transparent hand came up, trembling. It was a gesture of pure, frantic desperation. Her finger, a wisp of light, pointed. Not at me. Not at the basement door. It pointed to the wall, to a small, red metal box with a glass front. A fire axe. Her hand jabbed toward it once, twice, a sharp, violent motion. Then her ethereal form swung back to face the chained metal door. She pointed at the door, her entire being screaming a single, silent command. Break it. A spark caught in the dead tinder of my chest. It wasn't hope. It was something harder. It was a target. I was on my feet, moving before the decision was fully formed. My legs were stiff, my muscles screaming. I reached the red box. In case of fire, break glass. I didn't hesitate. I drew my fist back and punched. The glass shattered with a sharp crack, the sound echoing in the lobby. A piece of glass sliced my knuckles. I didn't feel it. I saw the blood, dark and thick in the dim light, welling up from the cut. It felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. My fingers closed around the wooden handle of the axe. It was heavy. Solid. A piece of the real world. I turned to the basement door. Maya's form was flickering now, like a bad television signal. She was fading, her silent scream growing wider as if the building was punishing her for her defiance, for giving me the key. For an instant I saw not her face, but the face of the man who wrote the diary, his eyes wide. Then she was gone. The air was just air again. I was alone. I took the axe in both hands, planting my feet on the tile. The first swing was clumsy. All my energy went into it, and the axe head hit the metal door with a deafening, percussive clang that vibrated up my arms and into my teeth. A shallow dent appeared in the steel. That was it. A low rumble started, deep in the guts of the building. A vibration I felt in the soles of my feet. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a machine coming to life. The machine. I swung again. Backquote clang backquote. And again. Backquote clang backquote. A rhythm of desperation. My breath came in ragged gasps. The skin of my hands was already starting to tear. From above, a new sound. Scrape. Drag. It was back. And it was faster. It was coming from the stairs, from the second-floor landing. He knew. The keeper knew. A noise from the walls. A groaning of old pipes under pressure. A dark line appeared in the plaster near the ceiling. A spiderweb of cracks spreading outwards. A single drop of black liquid fell, hitting the tile with a soft backquote pat backquote. It was thick and oily, and it smelled foul, a chemical stench mixed with decay. Another drop fell. Then a stream. It started to run down the wall in a dark, viscous sheet. Scrape. Drag. Scrape. Drag. Closer now, just at the top of the main staircase. I ignored it. I focused on the door. Not the center. The hinges. Chunks of plaster and splintered wood flew with every impact. The noise was immense. A cacophony of shattering wood, screeching metal, and my own ragged breathing. The axe felt like it weighed 100 pounds. My shoulders burned. My lungs burned. The top hinge gave way with a tortured screech. The door sagged, hanging crookedly in its frame. One more swing. I put my entire body into it. The axe head bit deep into the lower hinge, ripping it from the rotten wood of the frame. The door fell inwards with a tremendous crash, revealing a square of perfect, bottomless black. I didn't pause. I scrambled over the fallen door and into the darkness beyond. The air was a physical blow. Hot. Thick. With the smell of hot metal, oil, and something else. Something organic and sour. The smell of the keeper. I landed on a concrete floor, my hands and knees scraping on the rough surface. Behind me, in the doorway, a silhouette blocked the dim light from the lobby. The keeper. He was a stooped, broken thing. His head low, one shoulder higher than the other. He didn't rush in. He stood there, filling the frame. A low sound came from his chest. A wet, rattling growl that was part human pain and part mechanical failure. My eyes adjusted. The room was not completely dark. A faint, pulsing red glow emanated from the center of the space. It was the boiler. It was a monster of iron and rivets, a great black cylinder lying on its side, as big as a car. Pipes snaked from it in every direction, climbing the walls like iron vines. The thing wasn't just running, it was alive. The metal plates on its side seemed to flex, to expand and contract with a slow, rhythmic pulse. Thump thump, hiss, thump thump, hiss. It was a heart. The heart of the building. And it was beating. The keeper took a lurching step into the room, dragging his dead leg behind him. The scraping sound was horrible on the concrete floor. He was not looking at me. His gaze was fixed on the boiler. He was its guardian. I had the axe. I had one purpose. I surged to my feet and ran, not away from the keeper, but directly toward the boiler. He roared. A true sound this time. A shriek of metal being torn apart and a human throat being shredded. He lunged for me, his long arm reaching, his fingers like claws. I was faster. I reached the boiler, the heat from it blasting my face. I swung the axe. I didn't aim for the main body. I aimed for the cluster of pipes and valves near the front. The axe head struck a large, brass valve wheel. It shattered, and a jet of high-pressure steam erupted with a piercing scream, instantly fogging the air with a scalding white cloud. I couldn't see. I could only hear the shriek of the steam and the enraged howl of the keeper somewhere in the mist. I stumbled back, waving a hand in front of my face. The steam was blinding, burning. I could feel the keeper moving, a large shape in the whiteout. I had one chance. I took a breath, the hot, wet air searing my lungs, and lunged forward again, swinging the axe blindly in the direction of the boiler's great, black belly. I felt the impact before I heard it, a solid, deep thud as the axe head bit into the iron plate. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a deep, groaning tear. It was not the sound of an explosion. It was the sound of a living thing being disemboweled. The metal screamed as it was rent apart. There was no fire, There was light. A blast of pure, white light erupted from the boiler. A silent, all-consuming wave. It was brighter than the sun, a clean, sterile light that bleached all color from the world. The force of the rupture threw me backwards off my feet. I hit the concrete wall hard, my head snapping back. The last thing I felt was a sharp, cracking sensation at the base of my skull. Then, nothing. Silence. Whiteness. I am standing. The air is cool, the lobby is clean. Sunlight streams through the front door, catching dust motes dancing in the air. I looked down at my hands. They are clean. Uncut. I am wearing a blue work shirt. Janitor's clothes. They feel familiar. Comfortable. I hear a noise from outside. The rumble of a truck. The squeal of air brakes. A car door slams. Footsteps on the pavement outside. They are coming up the front steps. I feel a pull, an instinct I do not question. My feet move on their own, carrying me across the polished tile floor. I stop in front of apartment 304. My apartment. The door is closed. The front door of the building opens. In walks a young man, my age, carrying a cardboard box. He looks tired, but excited. The look of someone starting a new life. He looks around the lobby, taking it all in. I feel the muscles in my face pull into a smile. It feels strange, like a mask I am putting on. I walk toward him, my steps slow and unhurried. One of my feet drags slightly, making a soft scraping sound on the floor. He looks up, startled, as I approach. I stop a few feet from him. I raise a hand in a friendly wave. "Welcome," I say. My voice is not my own. It is low, patient. "I'm the building caretaker. Let me know if you need anything at all." The light had no heat. It was not a light to see by, but a light that erased. It filled my eyes, my head. It was the color of nothing. Then, there was the scent of lemon polish and clean linen. I was in my bed. The morning sun was a warm weight on the duvet. It cut a clean rectangle on the wooden floor. No dust danced in its beam. The air was still. I blinked. My apartment was as I had first seen it, before I had unpacked a single box, before the first stain of living had marked it. The walls were a perfect, unblemished white. The books were gone from the nightstand. The pile of clothes in the corner was gone. It was a showroom, a picture in a catalog. I sat up. The movement was easy. There was no pain in my head, no ache in my shoulders from the axe. The fire axe. The thought was a small, foreign object in my mind, a piece of gravel in a clean machine. The boiler. The keeper. The door. The memories were there, but they had no sharp edges. They were like scenes from a movie I had watched a long time ago. They had happened to someone else. I swung my legs out of bed. The floorboards were cool and smooth under my feet. I stood, and the motion felt fluid, practiced. There was a sense of rightness to it, a feeling I had not known since I'd first put the key in the lock of this place. A deep, settled feeling. I walked into the living room. The same clean emptiness greeted me. The cardboard boxes were gone. The half-eaten container of takeout was not on the counter. The kitchen faucet did not drip. Everything was in its place, and its place was a state of perfection. It felt good. My eyes fell on my hands. I held them up in the sunlight streaming through the window. The skin was pale. I could see the fine blue lines of the veins beneath the surface. I turned them over. The knuckles were unscarred. The palms were smooth, without the calluses that had been torn open by the axe handle. I flexed my fingers. They obeyed. I looked closer. The sunlight did not just land on my hand. It seemed to pass through it. The edges of my fingers were indistinct, the way the air shimmers over hot asphalt. I could see the faint outline of the window frame through my own palm. The observation registered without alarm. It was a fact. The floor is wood. The walls are white. My hand is not solid. I let it drop to my side. I needed to see. The bathroom was just off the hall. I walked towards it, my bare feet making no sound on the floor. I stopped in front of the medicine cabinet mirror. My face looked back at me. It was my face. The eyes were mine. The shape of the jaw. But it was thin. Faint. Like a photograph left too long in the sun. I leaned closer. My breath did not fog the glass. My reflection was a watercolor wash. A suggestion of a person. And behind me, standing just over my shoulder, was a shape. It was a woman. Her form was made of the same thinned-out light as my own. Her mouth was open in an expression of unending surprise. I knew her. Maya. She was not looking at me. She was looking into the mirror, at the space just behind her own transparent form. I followed her gaze. Behind her, another shape was layered, fainter still. A man with wide, frantic eyes and a thin mustache. The man from the diary. And behind him, another. And another. A crowd of silent, layered images, each one less distinct than the one before it, stretching back into a depth the mirror should not have been able to contain. They were stacked like translucent photographs, a chorus of the lost. I was the newest photograph, the one laid on top, the clearest of the fading collection. We were all looking forward. We were all trapped in the silvered glass. I tried to step back. My feet would not move. The thought came, run. It was a clear, sharp command from a part of my brain that still remembered panic. I pushed against the floor. My legs were stone. They were part of the building's foundation. I strained, a silent scream of effort building in my chest. My body was an anchor. My mouth opened. I drew in air, or the memory of air, to shout. The muscles in my throat contracted. My jaw worked, but the only sound was a faint, dry click. The scream was trapped inside, a wild bird beating its wings against the cage of my ribs. My thoughts were not mine anymore. They were becoming a soup. My own terror was a sharp, hot spike, but it was being cooled, diluted by other feelings. A deep, weary sadness that smelled of old perfume, Maya. A frantic, academic curiosity that felt of paper and ink, the diary writer. And beneath it all, a cold, vast, patient hunger. It was not an emotion. It was a state of being. It was the building. The foundation. The pipes. The boiler. It was a slow, digestive process. And I was the meal. My panic was being broken down. My memories filed away. My will unspooled and repurposed. I was a passenger. A horrified witness inside a body that was no longer mine to command. I watched as my right hand, my translucent, fading hand, lifted. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace that I had never possessed. It floated past my face and reached for the bathroom counter. My fingers, guided by a will that was not my own, closed around a black felt tip pen. The plastic felt both real and unreal, a solid object held by a phantom limb. My body turned, a smooth pivot on unmoving feet. It walked me from the bathroom, back into the empty living room. It stopped in front of the kitchen counter. My hand placed the pen down. My other hand reached for a small, yellow notepad that had not been there a moment before. It was fresh, the top sheet empty. The pen was in my hand again. I watched, helpless, as the tip lowered to the paper. The part of me that was still me screamed, "Don't write it! Don't do it!" My fingers tightened on the pen. The script that flowed onto the page was neat, clean, with a friendly, open loop in the letter L. It was not my handwriting. Just wanted to say welcome to the building. Made some cookies if you'd like, they're on the mat. Let me know if you need anything at all. Your neighbor. The hand placed the pen down. It tore the sheet from the pad with a quiet, clean rip. It folded the note in half. And then I saw the box. On the counter, next to the notepad, sat a white bakery box tied with a red string. Where had it come from? I had no memory of it. I had not bought it, but it was there. Solid and certain. My hands untied the string. They opened the lid. Inside, a dozen chocolate chip cookies were arranged in a perfect circle. They smelled warm. They smelled of home. This was the toolkit. The bait. The same bait I had taken. The will of the building pulsed through me. It was not a voice. It was a command. An instruction as basic as a nerve firing. Good. The job was learned. The role was set. My body turned from the counter. It carried the box of cookies and the folded note. It walked towards the front door. I fought against every step. It was like trying to stop a river with a net. My consciousness was a thin film on the surface of a deep, relentless current. My hand reached for the doorknob. It turned it. The door swung open, not into the hallway of the third floor, but into a different space. The air was different here. Cooler. The light from the hallway was dimmer. I looked at the door I had just walked through. The number painted on it in black stencil was not 304. It was 404. I was no longer the resident of apartment 304. I was the thing that haunted apartment 404. The keeper. The caretaker. The building had moved me. It had given me my new place, my new function. From downstairs I heard a sound. The deep rumble of a large truck engine idling. Then the hiss of air brakes. A heavy door slammed shut. Footsteps on the concrete path outside. They were slow a moment. Then came up the front steps. The front door of the building opened. The command came again, sure and final. My feet began to move. I walked out of apartment 404, leaving the door ajar. I carried the cookies. The note was tucked under my thumb. My body descended the stairs, one step at a time. One of my feet dragged slightly on the wooden stair tread, making a soft, rhythmic scrape. Scrape. Drag. Scrape. Drag. I reached the ground floor. A young woman, my age, stood in the center of the lobby, a cardboard box in her arms. She looked tired from the move, but her eyes held the unmistakable gleam of a fresh start. She looked around the lobby, at the clean floors and the polished brass fixtures, with a small, hopeful smile. My smile. The muscles in my face pulled tight. It was an alien sensation. A mask being fitted. My body walked towards her, slow and unhurried. The scraping of my foot was the only sound. She looked up, startled by my approach. Her smile wavered. I stopped a few feet from her. I raised my free hand, the one not holding the offering, in a gesture of welcome. My mouth opened. The voice that came out was not my own. It was a low, patient rasp, the sound of dust and rust given life. "Welcome," I said. "I'm the building caretaker. Let me know if you need anything at all." The last box was a bastard. It was the one labeled Kitchen, MISC, which was Chloe's code for everything she didn't know what to do with, but couldn't bear to throw away. The can opener that only worked if you held it at a certain angle. A collection of mismatched mugs. The jar of spices she'd bought for a single recipe 2 years ago. It dug into her hip as she half waddled, half stumbled across the threshold of apartment 403. She dropped it with a loud thud and a grunt, the sound echoing in the bare living room. Home. She straightened up, pushing a damp strand of blonde hair from her forehead. The air smelled of fresh paint and old wood, a combination she found surprisingly comforting. Sunlight, clean and white, poured through the large window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A fresh start. God, she needed one. Her phone buzzed in her back pocket. She fished it out, swiping to answer. "Hey, Mom? Honey, are you in? Did everything get there okay? The movers didn't break the lamp, did they? You know your father glued that base back on himself." Chloe smiled, leaning against the doorframe and looking over her new kingdom of cardboard. "I'm in. Everything's here. The lamp is a pinnacle of structural integrity." "Don't be fresh. So, how is it? Does it look like the pictures?" "It's better than the pictures, Mom. It's huge. The floors are real hardwood, not that laminate crap. And the rent. Seriously, it feels like I robbed them." She lowered her voice in mock conspiracy. "I keep waiting for the catch. Like the whole building is powered by a cursed burial ground, or the plumbing is made of licorice." A laugh crackled over the line. Well, as long as it's not black licorice. I just worry about you being on your own in a new place. Are the neighbors nice? I haven't met anyone yet. The building seems pretty quiet, actually. I think I'm the only one on this floor right now. It's nice. No loud music to unpack to. Chloe pushed herself off the doorframe, ready to start the monumental task of unboxing her life. As she turned, her foot hit something soft just outside her door. She looked down. Oh, hang on a sec. Sitting on her worn welcome mat was a small white bakery box tied with a simple red string. Tucked under the string was a folded piece of yellow legal paper. What is it? Her mom asked. I think someone left me something. She crouched, a feeling of pleasant surprise warming her chest. The city was supposed to be a cold, anonymous place. This felt like a small town. She picked up the box. It was light. It's a box of cookies or something. And a note. Oh, that's so sweet. See? People are good. What does it say? Chloe untucked the note, her fingers tracing the neat fold. She flipped it open. The handwriting was clean, the loops and curves formed with a friendly, deliberate pressure. Just wanted to say welcome to the building. Made some cookies if you'd like. They're on the mat. Let me know if you need anything at all. Well, that's about the nicest thing that's happened to me all week, Chloe said, a genuine smile spreading across her face. It just says welcome to the building, and that they made cookies. Who's it from? Chloe's eyes scanned the bottom of the note. The signature was just as neat as the rest of the text. It's signed, Leo, at 404. She looked up. The door to apartment 404 was directly across the narrow hall. It was a mirror image of her own, but it seemed different. Cleaner. Her own door had scuffs and marks around the lock from previous tenants. The number 403 was painted in a slightly faded black. The door of 404, however, was pristine. The dark wood seemed freshly polished. The brass number plate, 404, gleamed under the dim hallway light, catching it in a way that made it look brighter than it should be. There was no doormat. No scuff marks. It was the door of a person who took care of things. Chloe? You still there? Yeah, sorry. It's from my next-door neighbor, Leo. She stood up, holding the box and the note. I should probably go say thank you. Wait until you've settled in, honey. You look a mess, I'm sure. Mom, I'm wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. It's the official uniform of moving day. If he's a decent human, he'll understand. She felt a small, silly flutter of social obligation. It would be rude not to. He went to the trouble of baking. Listen, I'm gonna go say hi. I'll call you back in a bit, okay? All right. I love you. And don't talk to strangers for too long. He's my neighbor, not a stranger. Love you too. She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. She held the small box in one hand. It felt improper to show up with his own gift, so she carefully placed it just inside her apartment door, leaving the note on top. She took a deep breath, ran a hand through her hair to pat it down, and wiped her sweaty palms on her sweatpants. Just go say thank you. It's a normal thing to do. She stepped out into the hallway. The air here was cooler, more still. The floor was old linoleum that absorbed the sound of her sneakers, making her approach feel stealthy. She walked the few feet to the door of 404. Up close, she could see the flawless finish on the wood, the lack of any nicks or scratches. It was strange. Even a new door would have some small imperfection. This one had none. She raised her hand, knuckles hovering for a second before she gave 3 firm, polite knocks. The sound was loud in the quiet hall. It wasn't absorbed like her footsteps. It bounced off the walls, sharp and definitive. She waited. She could hear the faint hum of the building's electricity, the whisper of air through a ventilation grate. She was about to knock again when she heard a sound from inside the apartment. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't footsteps. It was a soft, rhythmic scrape. A dragging sound. Scrape. Drag. Scrape. Drag. It was slow, measured, and it was getting closer to the door. Chloe's polite smile tightened. An image of an old man with a walker flashed through her mind. Maybe he was elderly. That would explain the handwriting. The doorknob began to turn. It moved with a slow, smooth certainty. A soft click echoed as the latch disengaged. The door swung inward. A man stood in the doorway. He was young, maybe her age, with dark hair that was messy in a way that looked deliberate. He was wearing a simple gray t-shirt and dark pants. Her eyes met his, and the friendly thank you she had prepared died on her lips. His eyes were the only thing that was wrong. They were dark, and they were fixed on her, but they seemed to look straight through her, like polished glass looking out at nothing. There was no flicker of recognition, no curiosity, no life. Just a deep, unnerving stillness. But he was smiling. It was a wide, bright, welcoming smile. It stretched his lips and showed his teeth. It was the kind of smile you'd see in a toothpaste commercial. It was a perfect smile, a practiced smile. And it was completely disconnected from the placid void in his eyes. The combination was jarring. It was a mask. He leaned against the doorframe. His body was relaxed, casual. He tilted his head slightly. "Hi," he said. The voice was not what she expected. It wasn't a man's voice. It was melodic, soft, and distinctly female. It was a gentle, almost musical sound that was so profoundly at odds with the man it came from that Chloe's brain took a second to process it. She felt a disorienting lurch in her stomach, the kind you get when you miss a step in the dark. "Just moving in?" the man asked, his pleasant, feminine voice filling the space between them. He gestured with his head into the darkness of the apartment behind him. It was impossible to see past the threshold. Chloe found her own voice. It came out as a squeak. Yeah, I'm Chloe, apartment 403. The man's smile widened, if that were possible. The skin around his eyes didn't crinkle. "Leo," he said, the woman's voice forming the name. "I know. I saw the truck." He pushed himself off the doorframe, opening the door wider. "Welcome, please, come on in." A cold prickle of alarm went up Chloe's spine. It was a primitive, animal instinct, a warning bell clanging in a deep part of her mind. Something was not right. The eyes, the voice, the perfect, still smile. Everything was a contradiction. "Oh, I can't," she said, her own voice sounding thin and weak. She took an involuntary step back. "I just wanted to say thank you for the cookies. That was really nice of you." Leo's smile didn't falter. The stillness in his eyes didn't change. He didn't seem to have heard her refusal. "It's no trouble at all. I insist. I'm sure you could use a break from all those boxes." He took a step forward, into the hallway, and for the first time Chloe saw his feet. He was barefoot. One of his feet, the right one, dragged slightly on the linoleum as he moved. It made a soft, whispery scrape. The sound she had heard from inside. Scrape. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't right. This wasn't normal. The social contract was breaking down. And she didn't know the rules of this new interaction. Her polite refusal had been ignored. He was standing too close now, his strange, vacant gaze pinning her in place. The hallway suddenly felt very narrow, the walls pressing in. I really should get back to unpacking," she stammered, her eyes darting to the safety of her own open door just a few yards away. It seemed a mile. He raised a hand, a slow, placid gesture, and placed it on the wall next to her head, blocking her path. His movements were fluid, graceful. His skin was pale. Through the thin fabric of his t-shirt, she could see that his frame was slight, almost delicate. But his presence felt immense. "It will only take a minute," he said, his borrowed female voice a low, persuasive croon. "We're neighbors, after all. We should get to know each other." Chloe was frozen. Her breath was trapped in her lungs. The alarm bells were screaming now. The smiling mask, the dead eyes, the wrong voice, the scraping foot, the casual way he had just trapped her. It was all a tapestry of wrongness. She opened her mouth to shout, to say no, to tell him to get away from her, but all that came out was a dry click in the back of her throat. His other hand, the one not braced against the wall, came up and gently took her by the elbow. His touch was cold, not cool, but a deep, penetrating cold, like a piece of metal left outside in the winter. It seeped through her sleeve, into her skin, into her bone. "Come on," he said, the smile never leaving his face. He began to guide her, a gentle but firm pressure, turning her from her own apartment and towards the black, open doorway of his. "Let's be friends." She tried to pull her arm back. Her muscles bunched, her feet refused to move. But his grip, for all its gentleness, was like iron. He was stronger than he looked. So much stronger. He pulled her forward, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. He was guiding her into his apartment. The blackness of the doorway loomed. It didn't smell of anything. Not food, not air freshener, not even dust. It was the absence of scent. The absence of light. The absence of everything. As she crossed the threshold, pulled by a smiling man with a dead person's eyes and a woman's voice, the heavy wooden door of apartment 404 swung silently shut behind her. The click of the latch was the final sound,